smoke burned the lungs. The sky tore open, an impossible white searing against the morning haze. Roofs collapsed before eyes could register them. Metal screamed as it twisted, and the ground itself shivered beneath the blast. Men in crisp uniforms froze, half dazed, half blinded, their hands instinctively reaching for nothing. Somewhere, a child screamed. A helmet rolled across the cracked pavement, spinning to a stop near a crater filled with heat and ash. Paper, wood, and glass rained from the heavens, a storm of ordinary city life transformed into ruin. In the distance, a figure stumbled, clutching a notebook, sweat and blood mixing on the collar of his coat. He looked up. The skyline he had studied, guarded, and defended was gone. No radio chatter, no orders, just the rising wall of fire and the smell of burning flesh. Somewhere behind him, a desk toppled, scattering messages and maps, meaningless now. One thought struck him, clear and unignorable. The city, the people, the army's presence, erased in a single instant. And in that silence, one question haunted every mind that remained standing. How do you fight a weapon that cannot be seen? Because what happened next would rewrite everything. Japan in the summer of 1945 was a nation teetering on the edge of collapse. Years of total war had drained its cities, its industry, and its people. The Pacific Islands had fallen one by one, Okinawa reduced to rubble after months of bloody combat. American bombers had flattened Tokyo, leaving 500,000 homeless. But the Japanese High Command still clung to strategies that might stall defeat. Reports spoke of a new weapon, though details were scarce, whispered in intelligence briefings, its magnitude barely comprehended. Hiroshima had been designated a key military hub. Army headquarters, supply depots, communication centers. Factories humbly manufactured trucks, ammunition, and aircraft parts. It was a city of both civilian and military significance. The leadership believed in its strategic value, not as a cultural jewel, but as a node of resistance and coordination. A place that, if destroyed, would disrupt command and morale. Across the empire, the political stakes were immense. The imperial government balanced on a knife's edge, negotiating with limited diplomacy, facing an enemy whose capabilities seemed limitless. Air raids had become routine. Firestorms had devoured cities with a certainty that shook even hardened officers. By August 1945, Japan's military knew it could not match American industrial output or technological advancement. The tension within the High Command was a mix of fear, pride, and desperation. Orders were given, reinforced, and repeated. But every report arriving from the front lines carried an undertone of inevitability. The homeland was exposed, and the next blow could come from a weapon that defied comprehension. The very notion of defense felt increasingly futile. Yet surrender remained unthinkable for many, of the generals still commanding from their war rooms. Hiroshima lay on the western edge of Honshu, a city chosen for its strategic value, yet unsuspecting of the magnitude of the destruction to come. Its rivers cut the city into neat, human-scale blocks. Bridges arched over water like veins of commerce and daily life, and surrounding hills framed it like a natural fortress. Within these streets, the army maintained its headquarters, logistics offices, and storage depots. Troops moved in disciplined patterns, performing drills and inspections, unaware that nothing in history had prepared them for what was coming. Factories churned out trucks, engines, and munitions, while civilians carried on in a fragile rhythm, their lives interlaced with military activity. Roads were clogged with supply convoys, telephone lines hummed with coded messages that would become irrelevant in minutes. Geography had long been a silent ally to defense, but the city's structure now offered no protection against the unimaginable. August 6, 1945, was clear and calm. The sun warm but deceptive. Reconnaissance flights had noted the city's size and layout, yet the nature of the threat remained invisible to those below. Military officers cataloged routines, schedules, and rotations, believing that warnings of conventional bombings were sufficient. But the timeline of destruction was merciless. The city's coordinates, its significance as a hub for troop movement and communications, made it a target of precision. The collision of geography, strategic importance, and human presence ensured that the moment of impact would be catastrophic, a convergence that no pre-existing defenses could withstand. As the morning progressed, no one could have known that Hiroshima's carefully mapped streets, its soldiers and civilians, would be erased in a single, blinding instant. Technological constraints amplified the horror. Japanese air defense relied on radar and early warning stations built for conventional bombers. The atomic bomb bypassed both detection and interception. Officers learned, in terrifying hindsight, that their systems were blind to this new form of annihilation. Communication networks, telephones and telegraphs, melted or collapsed under heat, rendering coordination impossible. Maps, schedules, and contingency plans became meaningless scraps of paper scattered in rubble. Every calculation, every preparation, failed against a weapon that defied comprehension. From the enemy perspective, the U.S. strategy was surgical, precise, and brutal. Hiroshima was chosen not for spectacle, but for military significance. Its logistics, command posts, and troop concentrations. No dramatized dialogue, only cold, calculated decisions. The city would be leveled, the impact immediate, and the psychological shock reverberating through Japan's high command. The Americans understood the consequences. They did not need embellishment. Every flight path, every drop, every timing detail was verified and executed with clinical precision. Within Japanese leadership, the moral and psychological weight was immediate. Reports trickled in, fragments of the destruction. Some generals could scarcely believe the scale, others feared the implications for the empire's survival. They faced questions without precedent. How does a nation respond when its heart can be destroyed in moments? The dilemma was not rhetorical. It was a tangible, grinding pressure on men trained to act decisively. Every option felt inadequate, every action delayed, and every second that passed allowed the city's annihilation to imprint itself not only on the streets and buildings, but on the psyche of the high command, shaping the decisions that would follow. The first reports reached command centers in fragments, like shards of glass cutting through the morning. Smoke rose from Hiroshima in columns so dense they blotted out the sun, turning blue sky into gray ash. Officers held maps trembling in their hands, tracing streets that no longer existed. Telephone lines hissed and sputtered. Messengers returned burned or not at all. Soldiers tried to regroup, but the ground itself seemed to reject order, shaking under unseen forces. Telegraph operators relayed half-formed reports. City, destroyed. Unknown casualties, impossible. The words stopped midstream as equipment fried. In the distance, survivors staggered through streets of molten metal and fire, the smell of burning bodies hanging in the air. High-ranking officers grasped at impossible figures, trying to estimate the damage, the human cost, the military implications. Every calculation was irrelevant. Hiroshima was gone. Every sense screamed the truth before the reports could confirm it. The city had ceased to exist, erased in an instant that defied experience. The chaos was absolute. Commanders attempted to contact field units only to find silence, static, or replies filled with confusion and terror. Communications that normally carried instructions now carried disbelief. The human cost unfolded in real time as burned streets emptied of life, leaving only smoke, ash, and the echo of cries. Maps, once precise, were meaningless. Supply depots and headquarters lay in ruins. Men trained to assess and respond could do nothing but observe, powerless, as the enormity of the event pressed down upon them. Every plan, every contingency, every assumption had failed. In that moment, the High Command faced a reality without precedent, a weapon and a devastation that demanded acknowledgement before any action could follow. Confirmation arrived slowly, fragmented yet unmistakable. Aerial reconnaissance photos, telegrams, and eyewitness fragments pieced together the scale. Hiroshima was annihilated. Officers in Tokyo read the reports, faces pale, hands gripping edges of desks. The city's streets, once mapped and controlled, were now a molten grid. The riverbanks twisted into ash and metal. Messages between divisions stuttered, interrupted by chaos and failing lines. The High Command struggled to comprehend the speed and magnitude of the destruction. Commanders who had orchestrated campaigns across Asia were reduced to silent witnesses, confronted by a force that had invalidated every conventional strategy. Decision-making faltered under the weight of reality. Reports described tens of thousands dead, infrastructure obliterated, military units vaporized or scattered. Communications, supply chains, and morale all collapsed simultaneously. Orders were written, erased, rewritten, yet no action could undo what had already occurred. The High Command debated, feared, and hesitated, recognizing the conventional response was now irrelevant. Every calculation of defense, retaliation, or counterattack was moot against a weapon capable of instant, total annihilation. The psychological impact spread faster than any physical strike. Leaders confronted their own vulnerability, the impotence of centuries of military doctrine in the face of a single bomb. And in that charged silence, the enormity of Japan's situation crystallized. The empire's heart had been destroyed in a moment, and nothing would ever be the same. The human cost of Hiroshima unfolded with staggering clarity in the days that followed. Hospitals, already strained, were overwhelmed by waves of injured civilians and soldiers alike. Burns covered faces and limbs, eyes stared blankly through the smoke, and the moans of the wounded filled streets that were still smoldering. Food and water were scarce, and survivors wandered among ruins, searching for family, shelter, or any trace of life. Corpses lay unclaimed, blending with debris as the city's infrastructure had vanished along with its people. Military units stationed in the city were decimated, their personnel lists reduced to fragments. Officers documented losses in fragmented reports. Tens of thousands dead, tens of thousands more injured, and no immediate means to regroup, supply, or respond. Strategically, the destruction sent shockwaves through the Japanese military apparatus. Hiroshima had been a hub for troop movement, supply depots, and command communications. Its obliteration severed vital arteries. Operational plans relying on the city's facilities became immediately obsolete. Reports from remaining commanders were delayed, incomplete, or impossible to verify. The High Command faced a dual crisis: the loss of a military hub and the psychological blow to an already exhausted leadership. The immediacy of the destruction forced an urgent reassessment of the war, the capabilities of the enemy, and the very survival of the nation. Every officer, every clerk, every soldier understood that the scale of loss was not only physical, but existential, reshaping Japan's understanding of warfare and its limits. Morale within the Japanese leadership fractured under the weight of what had occurred. Cabinet meetings became tense, measured in silence as officials digested reports that confirmed what Hiroshima's ruins already screamed. The empire could not withstand this scale of destruction. Imperial communications attempted to coordinate responses, but each message seemed futile against the scale of loss. Even seasoned generals, hardened by years of conflict, struggled to reconcile training with reality. The city's annihilation forced questions about surrender, strategy, and survival that had never been formally addressed. Beyond the high command, the ripple effects extended to remaining cities and military units. News of Hiroshima spread through military channels and civilian networks, instilling a combination of fear, disbelief, and grim calculation. Units that had been mobilized for conventional defense suddenly faced an existential threat, their routines meaningless in the face of annihilation from above. Strategic reassessments were urgent but incomplete. The speed and scale of destruction left leaders improvising, guessing, reacting. The psychological toll was immense, a shadow of inevitability pressing on every decision. Every subsequent meeting, every communiqué, carried the weight of Hiroshima. A stark, irreversible demonstration of the destructive power now unleashed and the sobering reality that Japan's fate had entered an entirely new dimension. Hiroshima became a moment frozen in history, where human calculation met a force beyond comprehension. Smoke rose, ash fell, and yet the world continued, irrevocably changed. The High Command confronted not just loss, but the revelation that warfare had entered a new era, one where entire cities could vanish in a heartbeat. Survivors carried memories that no strategy could contain, and leaders faced decisions that would weigh on conscience and history alike. In the quiet after the fire, the enormity settled. The power to destroy on this scale was now real, and the shadow it cast would linger over humanity forever.